Hi and welcome to the video. I'm Damon, this is Dame Over, and today's video is all about the latest update to Battlefield 5. It's Tides of War Chapter 3 Trial by Fire update number 2. So I've got the full patch notes here. I cherry-picked the most important gameplay changes, improvements, and bug fixes, but if you guys, as always, want to see the full patch notes for yourself, I've linked that in the description. So let's start with Firestorm. And first of all, we'll look at gameplay fixes and changes. So to start with, there's an issue that's been fixed which is causing weapons to be misaligned when a player was in a man-down state while being spectated. This means that aiming is far more consistent if you have been downed and one of your dead teammates is watching you, making it far easier to challenge people if you are downed and are trying to shoot them with your sidearm. There's also been a minor fix put in place where V1 and artillery strikes now count as gadget kills in your stats. Pistols that have been picked up by players now properly drop on the ground if they die. This is a bit of a confusing bug for me, and I guess pistols not being there when you down a player makes them conspicuous just because of their absence, but thinking back into some games, I would notice quite often that there would not be a pistol dropped by a player when they had been killed. Next up, there's been a slight change to flare guns. You're now able to fire them when you're in water. Very useful if you're trying to island hop and you have to swim for a period of time. The draw distance for grenades and melee weapons has been increased as well, so if you're looking out for those in particular when you're looting, you'll be able to see them from further away. And another one involving grenades, they now will collide with the cover of the pickup truck instead of going through it. A glitch which I'm sure has resulted in some incredibly annoying deaths for some people. And another fix to do with grenades and vehicles. I didn't realize this was a thing because I tend to stay out of vehicles and I don't think I've ever dropped an item when I'm riding in one anyway. The fix is that grenades will no longer automatically drop when you're trying to drop an item as a passenger. The artillery strike on the minimap is now more visible because they've added a red outline to it. It'll make it far easier for you to not get caught on the very edge of it. And there's also been an improvement to the health cooldown UI. It no longer freezes if a player is dropping a healing item when it's in progress. There's also been a small improvement to getting into the game itself, and particularly to do with invites. So if you receive an invite from a player while you're looking for players yourself, you're now able to accept that invite and you'll be automatically put into the squad of the person that invited you, instead of being stuck searching for players, having to cancel, quit the game, etc, etc. And next up is for those of you guys that use the napalm helmet. It will no longer obstruct the player when aiming down sights, something that I'm sure again has been incredibly annoying to deal with. There's also been a fix so players can now jump as soon as they reach the start of the jump location instead of mashing that drop button over and over again, which is something I do all the time. And next up is a fix which I think will be particularly useful on console. Players will now no longer reload when you're opening doors. This I think will be particularly useful because the action and reload buttons are the same, so it will stop you if you're deciding to charge into a building with a not fully reloaded weapon. You won't be forced to stand there reloading your weapon while the person you're trying to kill is looking at you. There's also been an update to the UI in-game as well. The swap and drop button callouts are updated if you choose to change the keybinds in the game as well. And one of the most useful improvements, I think, there has been improved interaction detection to avoid issues when you're looting near objectives and vehicles, so you won't accidentally be jumping in and out of vehicles when you're just trying to pick up a weapon that's right next to it. There were also 3 or 4 different improvements to do with safes in particular, but I think the most important one is that interacting with the safe repeatedly will no longer make the progress bar disappear. That will help you if you are accidentally mashing the button for it not to completely destroy your progress. And one improvement that is confusing to me because I think this was already in the game anyway, when the player is killed by an artillery strike, an icon is displayed in the kill feed. This is something I thought was in the game and I have actually seen in the kill feed before, so that one's very confusing. I guess that just wasn't happening for everybody consistently. And another very big improvement to the mid-game, which I think is a very important one. It was a bit of a mistake to overlook this, I think, when Firestorm first dropped. But anyway, it's been fixed now, so that's great. The first wave of capture points now start earlier, before the zone starts to shrink for the first time. It was happening that these capture points would be outside of the play zone and would therefore be overtaken by the storm, which means that you can't capture them anyway. And there simply wasn't enough time to capture them before the storm took them over, which would nullify you going for them anyway. There have also been a whole host of fixes to Halvoy itself, so these map improvements and fixes are generally to do with visuals and to do with physics as well. There's lots of stuff that used to be clipping through things, crates that weren't on the floor when they absolutely should have been. It's a very long list and there are lots of different parts of the map that are affected, so if you want to see that again, I'd recommend checking out the patch notes yourself so you can find out exactly what's going on. But basically the environment is going to behave far more in the way that you'd expect, and lots of these patch notes literally say the player will no longer get stuck under XYZ. Well, I mean, it doesn't say XYZ, it explains what the thing is. You understand. But anyway, that's everything you need to know about Firestorm. So let's have a look at the multiplayer and single player. And again, I've cherry-picked the most important bug fixes, improvements, etc. Oh, I just hit my finger. That really hurt. So let's start with vehicles, and this time around they haven't had much done to them. There's only been a few fixes. So a bug has been fixed that enable players to use aeroplanes during the match start timer period, obviously giving you an advantage when people do spawn in on the ground. You're able to make bombing runs, etc. earlier on than is actually intended. There have been audio improvements to other players' tanks as well in the game, so you'll be able to tell where they're coming from far more easily. Next up is a section I like to call Weps, Gadgets and Specials. So there's been a fix to the Ribeye Roll S aperture sight. It used to be misaligned and was using the wrong magnification. That is now as it should be. The Gewehr 43 has had its reflex sight tweaked to look better. I don't know what that means. I honestly don't know what that means from that patch note, but hopefully one of you guys can tell me what that means. Also had the max recoil on the Bren gun increased, so it was too low before. They've now made it far more like it was intended to be. And this is a very big one for me because it is my favourite shotgun by far. The M1897 has had its damage drop-off reduced by 1 meter. The data was indicating, as they explained in the patch note, that it had too much range compared to other shotguns, but that was one of the reasons I loved it so much. Anyway, so that's going to need an adjustment in playstyle for those of you guys that are using it. There's been a change visually to how camera recoil works. So when you're firing a weapon, it's allowed to go a bit more off-center. The true point of aim is now going to follow the weapon and is not fixed to the center of the screen, which is how I thought it used to work. And gunplay has been slightly adjusted for SMG and assault rifles to do with the dispersion. So the second and third, sometimes fourth bullets for low rate of fire weapons are now more predictable, while later shots are less predictable if you're holding down the trigger. There's also been a decrease in time for your accuracy to return to normal, as it should do when you're not firing. This means that if you choose to tap and burst fire, you'll be far more rewarded. Your bullets will be far more accurate than they were before. But if you decide to hold down the trigger and just use all of your ammo in one huge burst, that you'll be punished in accuracy for that as well. There's also been 4 different improvements to gunshot sounds, so it makes them far more accurate in terms of location, so you can rely on your ears more if you can't see where the shots are coming from. This is something I feel like needed to be implemented quite a long time ago, so it's nice to see this one actually happening. Next up, we've got soldier fixes, and this time around it's only a couple of them. So there's a bug that's been fixed with the medic class that will result in your weapon floating in the air when the player was running briefly after reviving another player, one that's caused some massive amounts of confusion in those close range gunfights when you're going for a danger res, so that has been fixed. And the first person animation when you're picking up health packs and ammo packs has been moved to take less of the screen, so you get improved visibility. And here is the section where I think the most important, and I think the majority of the patch notes for this patch have come from, and that is for UI, HUD, options and assignments. So to start with, the ticket counter that wasn't visible when you're playing Breakthrough, Frontlines and Airborne is now visible, so you'll be able to keep track of the score, something that needed to be fixed a long time ago but wasn't, unfortunately. And here is the #1 fix for this patch. They have disabled the saturation effect when you're regenerating health. I'm so happy about this. I'm so happy about this. It never made sense in the first place, so I can't believe why it was in the game. Anyway, it's been removed, so you'll no longer be looking through some sort of weird yellow lens. There's also been a fix to deploying and getting an error message. I'm sure you guys would have seen it before. It says the class you have selected is violating the server rules. This used to happen if you'd equipped a newly unlocked site, but that has now been fixed, so it won't come up anymore. There's also been a bug fixed that is preventing players from speeding up the bleed out timer when being in a downed state. So instead of having to sit there the whole time while you're bleeding out, you can actually increase the rate that you're bleeding out and get back in the fight. We've also had accuracy improvements when you're using a controller for the comms rows and the squad reinforcements rows. So for those of you guys that don't know what the rows is, I certainly didn't, so I had to look it up. It's the radial wheel that comes up if you're holding R1 when you're trying to give out orders, and also if you've decided to use some squad reinforcements. There was also a bug that used to appear when you're purchasing something with company coins saying not enough company coins. It's an error message that wasn't intended to be there, even if you did have the right amount of company coins. So for those of you guys that are purchasing recent rewards for cosmetics and for weapons, that won't happen anymore. And this one made me giggle. They've now added the soldier stance icon from single player and Firestorm into multiplayer. So not only in those game modes can your guy be bending over on the screen and presenting to the enemy, it's now been taken into multiplayer as well. And there has finally been a fix which was there from the very outset of Battlefield 5, where in the grenade selection menu, the smoke grenade selection used to show the frag grenade demonstration video, so you'd have literally no idea how the smoke grenade worked until you'd used it in game. There have also been the usual multiple stability improvements. These aren't in detail at all, so I can't tell you any more than that, unfortunately. But just underneath that, we've got 7 different PC-specific improvements. Almost all of them are relating to specific hardware. So if you're having any issues with your hardware and it working on Battlefield 5, I'd recommend checking out the list to see if any of it applies to you personally. And that is everything in the latest update to Battlefield 5. Some really good fixes in there, and lots of these annoying bugs that seem to have been taken care of. Some quality of life improvements as well, which is going to make the whole experience much, much better. And as you could tell from before, my favourite fix by far is disabling the saturation effect. I still can't understand why it was put there in the first place. But anyway, it's gone, so I don't have to worry about that anymore. But anyway, I want to know what you guys think about this patch. How do you think it will affect things? How do you think it will change Firestorm? Make sure you let me know what you think down in the comments below. And here's a real quick thank you to my Dame operatives, those of you guys supporting the channel through Patreon. It's because of you guys I'm able to get content out to you as often as I do, and hopefully I'll be able to do that even more often in the future with a bit more support. So if you want to become a patron yourself, there's a link in the description and the pinned comment. So if you had a good time, hit that like button. If you're new around here, hit that sub button. Don't forget the bell button so you don't miss any future posts. And as always, share this video wherever you like. Until next time, that's Dame over. Peace.